we went through this yesterday. Let's see. Carla, would you like me to kick it off or would you like to?
You can kick it off and then hand it over to me for the
Okay.
specific stuff.
Fantastic. Happy to do that. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much to our participants who have shown up for today's session. I'm Mimi Ye. I'm the Vice President of Human Capital for Connected DMV. Quick introduction, Connected DMV is a not-for-profit organization that focuses on improving the infrastructure for our region, which includes the District of Columbia, Northern Virginia, of which Fairfax County is obviously a very huge part, as well as parts of suburban Maryland. So want to welcome all of you and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us to talk about the emergency broadband benefit. Couple of quick housekeeping items. I think everybody on the line has already gone ahead and muted themselves. Really appreciate you doing that. So as you're coming onto the line, if you can go ahead and mute your sound, that'll make it a lot easier for folks to hear the presenters as we're talking through the different materials. Second item, as you can see on this slide, if you can go ahead, if you haven't already done so, please do go ahead and type in your name, your organization's name, if it's applicable, and your email address inside the chat window. We will not send you spam mail. I promise. This is just so that we can get a sense of the participation rate from each of the different sessions that we're holding. Third item, just to note for everybody, we are recording this session, so I don't want anybody to be caught unawares. We do not intend to widely distribute this recording. A lot of it is as much for making sure that we're accurately capturing your feedback and perspective as anything else. And then lastly, if you do have questions or comments, we have at least one part of our program this afternoon where we will take a pause to get questions and we'll ask folks to unmute themselves and go ahead and submit your questions. If you would prefer, you are always welcome to put your question into the chat function. Everybody's a Zoom expert, so you all know how to submit your questions in there. And one of my team members, Elle James, is on the line. I'm going to ask her to text me or notify me in some way if there's a question that comes up that we did not get a chance to address. If we happen to run out of time in our big 2-hour block this afternoon, we will track your question. That's part of the reason that we're recording this session, and we will get back to you with answers as quickly as we can. Sometimes there are questions that we're not going to be able to answer on the spot because this is a national program that's being rolled out by the FCC and Usac. So some questions might require a follow-up with that organization to get more details, but we will make a commitment to submit those questions. All right, let's go ahead and flip to our welcome. So welcome to everybody. Here's our high-level agenda. We'll do quick introductions. I'm going to hand the microphone over to Carla Bruce and her staff to talk a little bit about the broadband statistics in Fairfax County and why programs like the emergency broadband benefit are so important. Christine Jones from Fairfax Public Libraries is going to tag team with me as well, and we'll go through some slides and information about the EBB benefit and a little more detail for everybody's awareness. We'll go through a Q&A, and then we'll go through some areas where we're looking for support from all of you. As a quick note as well, for a bit of a guide path, we did block off 2 hours of time for this session. We're breaking up that 2 hour into 2 parts. The first part is really an overview of the need for broadband in Fairfax County and high-level information about the EBB program. So that's really the first part of this session. If that is your primary interest in today's call and that covers what you're looking for, you are welcome to drop off of the call after that first hour. If you are here because you want to learn more about what the application, eligibility, and enrollment process is for the EBB, that is what we'll be covering in the second half of the call. And that's why we've arranged it this way, so that folks who need to depart after the first hour have a good transition point to do that. But I will tell you that the program sounds very simple at its core. There's a lot of detail and there's a lot of specifics behind it. And we really feel that for consumers who want to take advantage and apply for this program, there's a lot of detail inside here that can be confusing or a little overwhelming. And the more prepared people are for those types of questions or requests for information and documentation, the better prepared they are, the better off the whole program is going to run and the better experience it will be for everybody. So this is why we're taking this extra time, and this is why we are holding these sessions on top of what you may have already seen or received through other channels. All right, let's go over to the next slide, please. And I will hand it over to Carla for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mimi, and thank you to Connected DMV and the Connectivity for All partnership. We're excited to be a part of it with other local jurisdictions who, like us, are really committed to ensuring that all people in our community have connectivity and access to the digital world. We are in our One Fairfax policy. So let me introduce myself first. I'm sorry. I'm Carla Bruce. I'm the county's Chief Equity Officer. And my role in the government is to apply or support the government in applying our One Fairfax policy, which commits us to consider equity in all of our planning and our decision-making. And one of the areas of focus in One Fairfax is digital access and literacy. And it was an area that was identified through our outreach to community. And they saw that as key to ensuring that they have access to the opportunities that would allow them to thrive and participate fully in our economy. And so what we've known and seen through the COVID-19 pandemic is that the negative impacts of COVID have had a disproportionate impact on low-income people and people of color. And so while they were hit hard prior to the pandemic, this has only exacerbated some of the inequities that we have seen. And particularly in the area of digital access and literacy, we have been looking at things that we can do as a county to support greater access for this population. So let's see. I'm joined, I don't believe she's with me today, but in addition to myself, I've been working with my colleague, Don Hyman, who is a project manager for One Fairfax. So for you all who are county employees and who are looking for some support or additional information about this partnership, please feel free to reach out to either Dawn or myself. And we're also fortunate to have the Fairfax County Public Library as our lead agency champion. And I want to thank Jessica and Christine, who is here representing the library today, because I think that the libraries are a really important community-based access point. And we want to utilize your wide-ranging placement across our community to connect to the communities that are most in need. Mimi mentioned that this broadband benefit is a great opportunity. It has been widely shared in our community, but we know that sometimes navigating processes can serve as a barrier to people being able to access the benefits that would help them meet their needs. And so we really are thankful to the library system for being willing to serve as as navigators to help folks in our community get connected to this important benefit.
Carla, could I jump in here for just a quick
Sure.
second?
Mm-hmm.
I want to remind everybody, I know for all you library folks out there, we talk about equity a lot, and it's often this sort of high level discussion that we have. And so I wanted to remind you of a few of the things that we've done over the last couple of years with equity in mind. And so we're making policy decisions, we're making changes to services based on equity to make the library in the county a more equitable place. So just a few examples to remind you of things you probably already know. We've removed a lot of fees, like the cost of replacement cards. It used to cost $2, now it doesn't. Guest passes to use the internet, we no longer charge for that. We've given people opportunities. We're moving toward removing late fees or fines, but in the meantime, we've instituted food for fines and read away your fines as opportunities for people to not have to pay us cash. Other things we've done that are not economically related are we no longer ask for program registration. So people who don't have internet access can still attend our programs. And we've removed gender on accounts for people who don't identify with a specific gender. We've also had programs like Meet Your Muslim Neighbor. And we've been visiting on an annual basis the Adult Detention Center, because that's a community that is often marginalized. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a couple of hardcore examples of equity and how it applies to the library. And thank you, Carla.
Yes, thank you, Christine. And again, the library is in this endeavor and throughout our journey to become One Fairfax have been at the forefront of looking at how you all can conduct your work in ways that are helping to connect people to opportunity. So we are very appreciative of that. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we in Fairfax County have noted that there are populations in our county and areas of our county who have less access to the internet. And this is a map that shows, hopefully you are able to see it, but what it really is illustrating is that the darker blue areas on the map are areas with less connectivity, and a lot of our efforts are really concentrating on reaching the community in those areas. And so, there's local research, there's national research that speak to how important access to the internet is. So we've seen how important it was for students as they transition to being able to work, to do school from home. So many people worked from home, when we're all sort of forced to be in a telework state. But there are lots of other reasons why people need access to the internet. People go to the internet for information, to get their news, to shop. I think I do a little bit too much of that. People seek health information online. It's been a very important tool for searching for jobs, particularly during this period when so many people had to transition their careers because of the pandemic. And a lot of adults are doing their banking online. So the internet is no longer just sort of, and all of you know this, it's no longer just a luxury, it's a necessity. And so it's really important that we support not just our students in getting access to the internet, but also the adults in our community. And when we think about the adults, we also are thinking about seniors as well. And there are lots of additional barriers that seniors face in terms of accessing the internet. So our focus is both on promoting access to the internet, but also on promoting literacy so that people are able to use the access in a way that helps them to support their life activities. Here's some data that's at a bit more granular level about households without internet access. So you noticed on the previous slide that there were those areas on the map, the darker areas on the map, where there was less internet connectivity. But we're also thinking, looking sort of deeper within the districts and the zip codes, and getting down to, in some cases, the ability to look at a census tract level. This data here is still at the zip code level, but you'll see that within the Mason district more broadly, there are connectivity issues. But when you look at zip code 22041, 18.8% of households do not have access to the internet. So if you compare that to the percentage of people in the county overall, I think that overall in the county, it's 4-point-something%. So you can see that there are definitely areas of the county that have significantly less access. And so it's really those areas of the county that we're concentrating our efforts. The data where this comes from is a bit dated. It comes from the American Community Survey back in 2017, but utilizing data is really important. And as more recent data becomes available, we'll be utilizing that further to tailor our approach. But in addition, we hear and validate through our communications with residents and partners that we work with in the community that these are the areas where residents are facing lack of access. And again, that lack of access is can be for a number of reasons, but affordability is the primary reason. And I believe this is where I will hand it over to Mimi.
Great. Thank you so much, Carla. And thank you for those important remarks about Fairfax County and the government's mission and vision on really hoping to close that digital divide. All right, folks, here we go. So let's talk some more about the emergency broadband benefit. There are two different federal programs in place today. On the chart, you can see Lifeline is on the left-hand side, and the new emergency broadband benefit is on the right-hand side. Both of them are governed and managed through the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. Lifeline has been around longer, right? It's been around since the mid-'80s, and that was really more focused on making communication services affordable. Obviously, in the '80s, we didn't have the same level of reliance and the proliferation of the internet. So it was much more focused on subscription of telephone services. And one way that you can tell is because the Lifeline program is mainly available only through approved ETCs or eligible telecommunications carriers. And not every organization that provides mobile phone service or internet service is qualified to be an ETC. So the Lifeline subscription and benefit, while it's nice and it provides a discount of $9.25 per month, it is very much focused on telephone or broadband service only through those ETCs. And in contrast, what we're going to focus on today is the emergency broadband benefit that provides a little more of a discount, more benefits, and is open to a broader range of service providers. So if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a bit of an eye chart and it's not the prettiest one, so I apologize. But the bottom line here is you can see that on the left-hand side, the FCC is all the way up at the top. As I mentioned, they're the group that is governing the emergency broadband benefit. They have a bunch of divisions and bureaus that undertake the work on behalf of the commission. For this particular benefit, the emergency broadband, it is being governed and overseen through the Wireline Competition Bureau, and then it is being managed through the Universal Service Administrative Company. When people talk about Usac, that is what Usac stands for, Universal Service Administrative Company, and then the funding comes out of the Universal Service Fund. The main thing I want you to understand about this slide is that the EBB is a temporary benefit It is for eligible low-income households. We'll get into the description of what that means for eligibility purposes. For those eligible households, they will receive up to a $50 per month discount on their broadband service and associated equipment, and up to $75 of a discount per month if that household is on a qualifying tribal land or is a member of a recognized tribe. Additionally, some providers, not all of them, but some of them are offering a device along with the broadband benefit. That device might be a laptop, might be a tablet, might be a computer, it might be a MiFi. So the way that it's going to work is that the service provider is going to get a reimbursement from the FCC of up to $100. And then the consumer is going to pay somewhere between $10 to $50 for that particular device. So again, these are the main points that I want you to understand. We'll go into more detail on the other slides. The key other item here is this slide's a little bit outdated. The EBB program actually went live last week in the middle of May. It will continue until that fund runs out of money. It's a $3.2 billion fund, but it is a national fund. So we've had analysts run some estimates on when they think the EBB funding might run out. And some projections have it running out sometime in the late fall, around Thanksgiving. So the benefit ends when the funds run out of money, or 6 months after HHS declares an end to the COVID-19 health emergency, whichever one is sooner. So that 6 months after the end also gives you a little bit of an estimate of what the government is thinking in terms of how long they thought the funding would last. Next slide. Okay. Not every broadband provider is going to participate in the broadband benefit. There's a tool that the FCC has provided. It's called the Companies Near Me tool, where people can look up by state the list of providers who are participating in the emergency broadband benefit. Our team here from Fairfax County government has graciously taken a much longer list of providers that are participating in the EBB for the Commonwealth of Virginia and have narrowed it down to providers that they know are currently offering service within Fairfax County. I will also tell you that some of the tools and different services that the FCC is providing on their EBB website have been a little bit glitchy, and some of them are having some intermittent problems in sorting data or providing updated information. So you may have to go back more than once to get the latest list, but this list is fairly accurate. It was just pulled a couple days ago. The other thing I want you to note are two items on this table. The third column that says broadband service type, you'll see that some providers are providing fixed broadband, some are providing mobile broadband. The mobile broadband is typically in the form of a MiFi, right? That's going to give you access to the internet through a MiFi device. And then the far right column, you can see which providers are offering a device in addition to the broadband discount. Again, that device, they do not clarify for us whether the device is a tablet, a laptop, a computer, or a MiFi, but at least they're offering something. The other thing that we have heard is that many of the service providers have low inventory of their devices. So it's really to the consumer's best interest to apply as soon as possible and to try to get one of the devices sooner rather than later. If a resident already has a device through a different program that's being provided, then that's less of a concern. All right, next slide. There's a lot of different ways that a household could apply for the EBB program, and some of the most common ones are listed below. For some of the verification steps that are out there, when the FCC asks for an applicant to verify that they do qualify, the government will look up a consumer's income, and almost everybody's going to end up uploading some kind of document. Again, we're going to get into a lot of those details later on inside this deck, because it's really helpful for people to be prepared so they know what documents to bring, they know what to expect, and ultimately it makes the whole process a little bit smoother. I can tell you that as a very small example, I finally went through the process of getting my real ID to replace my older driver's license in Virginia. And I did a lot of research to understand what documents I needed to bring with me so I wouldn't have to go back and forth, because there's nothing worse than going to an appointment and waiting in line, going through all the check-in process, only to find out that you don't have one little piece of identification or document that proves that you are eligible to receive whatever the product or the certificate or the identification card is, and then have to make another appointment and come back all over again. So we really want to help people have as smooth an experience as possible. Okay, next slide. So this benefit is available to households. This gets into a little bit of detail about how the FCC defines what a household is. And essentially, it comes down to whether you are sharing money to take care of different expenses and obligations. A household, as the FCC defines it, is a group of people who live together and they share money. They do not have to be related to each other. So even if you're not related, if you meet those first two conditions, the FCC would consider you a household. If you're living together and you're sharing money, you are one household. If you either do not live together or you do not share money, if one of those two conditions is not true, then you are more than one household. And the FCC is going to ask all kinds of questions, and we'll walk through the different screenshots and how they ask those questions and how people can opt to reply. The bottom of this slide, I'm not going to drain it all, but you can see examples of a one household scenario versus a multiple household scenario. Okay. So here's the process. Here's the bottom line. If a person already subscribes to Lifeline, or if a person is already enrolled in one of the low-income programs that is provided through a local service provider, then they do not have to check eligibility through the national verifier. They can skip that step, and that is only because by already being a member of Lifeline or already being enrolled in one of those low-income programs through a service provider, their data is already in the national verifier database. So those people have a pretty automated one-stop shop situation. They bypass the national verifier and they go directly to the service provider to elect for service. For everybody else, this is, I know there are 4 steps in here, but the application and enrollment process is really a 3-step process. So first, people would go to getemergencybroadband.org. That will take them to the national verifier. They'll go through a couple of screens to set up their account, provide some basic information. The system will ask for information like a social security number, but people can use alternate forms of identification. Once they're enrolled, the verifier will look up certain pieces of information to validate eligibility, and then they will proceed. In step 2, people will decide which service provider they want to use. So remember that slide earlier that had that table that shows different service providers, fixed or mobile broadband, device or no device. That's the list of eligible service providers that a consumer would choose from. Then they would select a plan. So they would contact one of those service providers, find out what the different plans are that that service provider is offering through the EBB program, and then make a decision on which plan they want to sign up for. All customers have to affirmatively opt into the EBB first and foremost, and they have to opt into the service provider of their choice. Some service providers are going to have some additional application steps that they want people to complete, but most of the service providers that we've spoken to, and we've been in touch with the major carriers between Comcast, Verizon, RCN, Cox, T-Mobile, most of them have said that their process is going to be pretty basic and straightforward, because most of the data that they need is going to get collected through that eligibility national verifier step. So they'll go through, collect any remaining documentation. If needed, they will, the consumer might have to set up an installation appointment, especially if it's a fixed broadband program that they're signing up for. And then they will go ahead and start their account and move forward. Step 4, this last step, it really sits outside of the EBB program, but we're really encouraging jurisdictions and folks like yourselves to help consumers plan ahead to the time when the EBB program concludes. There's nothing worse than getting access to a program or a benefit and then not understanding or being ready for the fact that that program is going to go away at some time. And people typically need a little bit of planning time to know what to do next and what their different options are. Lifeline should still be available as an option. And we have also heard, nothing is official, but we have heard that the Biden administration is looking into either extending funding for the EBB or creating a more permanent type of digital assistance program. Okay, so next slide. Couple of different ways to apply and get verified for eligibility. Like I mentioned, they can either, a consumer can either apply directly with the service provider, which typically only happens if they've already got a service in place with that individual. They can apply online by starting with the national verifier. Option 3 is there are options for a consumer to receive an application by mail, or I think it's actually that they have to work with a service organization like the library or other service departments and have them print out the EBB application form, and then the consumer can fill it out, sign it, mail it in along with the supporting documentation and go from there. We're focusing on options 1 and 2. I think that option 3 is a less desirable option because it's definitely going to take a lot more time. And I can tell you right now that I went on to the EBB website last night, and there's already one of those warning messages that says that they're experiencing higher than usual call volume. It's one of those, we appreciate your patience as we respond to everybody's calls and emails. And it's just telling you that there's more demand for a service like this. And therefore, as much as possible, we really want to encourage people to apply online and digitally rather than by mail. Okay, next slide, please. I think this really gets into the same information that we were talking about before. If you're an existing Lifeline subscriber, you skip the step about going through the national verifier. If you're already on a service provider's program, you also skip the national verifier. You can also skip the step about choosing your service provider if you already decide that you want to stick with the same one. And then on the far right, if you are either a brand new customer, you've never done Lifeline, you've never done, any of the low income programs, or you're switching from one provider to another, then you will have probably the longest set of application steps to follow. There's a question in the chat room. Will the library receive national verifier forms? Christine, I think that I'm gonna ask with you, I think what the library could do if it wanted is library could go to the EBB website and pull down the form or print out copies of the form and make it available if folks wanted, and if that's something that the Fairfax libraries are in a position to do.
Yeah, I would say that we probably don't want to have stacks and stacks of them just because we don't have an idea of how many people we might be asking for them. But yeah, if you want to print out 2 or 3 of them and have them available, make it part of your opening routine in the morning, just until you know what the demand's going to be. I think that's a great idea.
Perfect. Thank you, Christine. Hope that answers the question. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please.
Sorry, hang on. I just
Take your time. It's fine.
got my cursor.
I was getting dry mouth anyway, so it works out fine. And if there are other questions, feel free. Okay. This again is really where we're emphasizing that we want people to come with the right documents ahead of time. So a lot of what people who decide that they would like to help consumers go through the enrollment process, a lot of what you can do is properly prepare people for what to bring and what to expect based off of the type of information that people are going to be asked to provide. So this high level stuff, the name, the date of birth, social security number, or if they do not have an SSN, they can provide other forms of a government issued ID. And we will go into details of what those particular acceptable ID forms are. They get the choice of saying whether they would like to qualify or for EBB or Lifeline. We're focused on EBB. There's also an area where they can explain whether they qualify for EBB because of their personal situation or because of something that a dependent of theirs has participated in, which could include receiving a federal Pell Grant, and it could include being a participant in a free or reduced price lunch program through the public school system. Those are both eligible participating programs to be a part of the emergency broadband benefit. People will need to provide an email address when they are applying online. That's something that we also want navigators to understand and be prepared to help people set up an email address if they don't already have one. So things that are pretty common and easy for us to do may take a little more time and effort for others. That's why we're pointing these things out. In the third box of eligibility, again, people will be asked to explain and select the program that they participate in that demonstrates that they are eligible for the EBB. And in some cases, they will have to provide documentation. And I think we have a slide in here that's going to explain which programs need documentation and which ones do not. And then the last step is they finalize their application, they go through and verify and validate, yep, everything's correct, that's my address, this is my household, this is who I am, this is the program that I or a dependent of mine participates in. That person has to certify and sign the application. The system will provide a unique application ID. From the date that that unique application ID is created, the applicant has 90 days to enroll in the program with a service provider. If somebody cannot be verified real time because they had to upload documentation and it still needs to go through a manual review and approval process by the national verifier, they will get next steps on what needs to happen. We've already submitted a question to the FCC and Usac asking how long this manual process is expected to take. They told us that it would be a matter of minutes. I do not know if that's still the case, given what they've just described as a heavy volume of applications coming in. So maybe you want to buffer in and say that it's going to take at least a day or two for the verification to happen and for a response back to that email address to let the applicant know whether or not their application has been accepted and that they will have the ability to move on to the next steps. Okay, next step. Okay, oh, more words, it's killing me. Again, very similar to what I described before. And again, we will make all of these notes available to you so you can review them at your leisure. But once an applicant is verified through the National Verifier, you got to select a provider, contact the provider, let them know that you're participating in the EBB. The provider might ask some information to verify your identity because they're going to also go into the NLAD, the National Lifeline Accountability Database, which confirms two things. They want to confirm that you are in fact qualified for EBB. And then second, most providers are going to confirm that you're not already participating in a different service provider's program for the EBB. So again, everyone's going to have a slightly different process to select a plan and go through any installation details if needed. But in all cases, the consumer has to affirmatively opt into the EBB program. It is not something that the service provider can do on the consumer's behalf. It is not something that a navigator can do. And then, as we discussed, people will get up to a $50 a month discount on the services. Let's say somebody's bill every month is $45, then they do not have to pay anything, but they do not get a $5 credit, right? That's why it says up to $50. It is up to a bill of $50. If the bill is less than $50, the consumer doesn't have to pay anything, but they're not getting free money, okay? And then if the consumer wants to continue to receive internet service without interruption after the EBB benefit runs out, the consumer must contact the service provider and opt into a contract for service. They can either do it at the time that they're signing up for their EBB plan, or they can do it before the EBB service period runs out, but they've got to do it at somewhere in between that time frame. If they do not opt in, then the service will be turned off by the service provider, and then they can always contact the service provider for signing up for a different plan if needed. Okay. Any questions on that? It's a lot of data. It's a lot of text and information. All right, next slide. Okay, question and answer. How are people doing? People doing okay? Is this making sense so far? Is this microphone on? Anybody there? Hello? Okay. All right. Okay, great. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Sharon. All right, I hope that this is continuing to be helpful for everyone. Yep. Yes, Sarah, it is a lot of words, I know. Okay, great. And I'm glad to hear that people are hearing about it through WTOP. I think WUSA 9 is going to provide more information. So glad to hear that this is helpful for folks. Great. Let me see what else we have. Okay, almost done with the first section, and I'm going to do my very best to honor the first hour of our agenda. So let's power on through the next slide, please. Different ways that you can help us. You can help us by getting the word out about the EBB and sharing some of the knowledge that you just received in this first session. You can use your listservs, you can activate your social media, maybe use Nextdoor or WhatsApp. You can use your email and reach out to folks, but we're happy to share the materials from today's segment so that you can take and personalize pieces of it. There's also a whole bunch of tools, templates, flyers, posters, etc., that the FCC has already created that will make it super easy to really get the word out to everyone. So online outreach is a great way to help us. Second way to help us is by handing out flyers or hanging up posters, or maybe manning an information booth, maybe at the library if there's a poster that says, ask us about the emergency broadband benefit. There could be ways that people can come in and get more information. The thing that we've noticed is that, while Connectivity for All and Connected DMV is very focused on regional collaboration, we recognize that you guys are the ones that have the trusted relationship, and you can best represent the people in your community. If I were to go out and knock on the doors of different residents in Fairfax County, they don't know who I am, they don't know the organization that I work in, and I am immediately suspect. And that's okay. That's why we're looking to people like you who are very powerful and influential in your community. You are a trusted voice, and you are people who the community relies on to help them through interesting opportunities and programs like this. I kind of think of it similar to the vaccines when they first came out, and there was a lot of questioning and not a lot of clear information, and people are going to go to the reliable source for guidance on and advice on what they think people should do. So online outreach, handing out some printed media, or hosting an information session, that's the third way that you can help. You can either do a virtual one or an in-person one, depending on people's comfort level and logistical details. And then the last one, this is again what we'll cover in the second half of this call, helping somebody through the application and eligibility process so that we can train people up and then they can go out and really provide that hands-on help for people who are looking to get involved and to apply for the EBB. All right, next slide, please. Oh boy, here we go. All of these different tools and materials. There are infographics, there are press releases, there are sample Twitter and Facebook posts, there are fact sheets, flyers, handouts, public service announcements. I mean, it goes all over the place. And the nice thing as well is on the right-hand side, you can see that many of these handouts are available in other languages. They will be translated because we recognize that within our region, we have a lot of folks for whom English is not their first language and is not their preferred language. You can take these different documents and you can see that some of them are in PDF. So, the FCC would prefer that you not make changes, but some of them are in Word. So you can customize it for language and key messages that best meet your constituencies or the event that you might like to hold for them. Okay, next slide. Oh, even more information. So all kinds of resources. On this page, I will tell you the two things that I have found really helpful. Actually, three things. On the right side, under web resources, consumer FAQs, frequently asked questions and answers. There's a lot of good content in there, and the FCC is working really hard to update those questions on a regular basis. As more people apply for the service, I think that they'll get more and more questions. And I've already seen that they've updated the application process to make it a little bit easier. The other site that is really helpful, towards the bottom, right above request a speaker, see where it says getemergencybroadband.org. That is the actual site that people will go to apply for the benefit. So bookmark that, make a note of it, just know that it's available. And then the very bottom, if you decide that you would like to host an information session, kind of like this one, or if you want to, maybe host a mass enrollment event, that's another thing that Connected DMV is looking into and coordinating on. We are figuring out how we might be able to get a large space reserved where Comcast or one of the other service providers or several of them would join together and cover the cost of holding a mass enrollment, and they would cover the cost of the connectivity and the devices and maybe a tent so that it can be in the shade and all that good stuff. If you wanted to have somebody from the FCC speak at an event or be available to answer questions, the request a speaker is also available as a benefit. I have submitted a request, but I have not received a response yet. So I'm going to keep following up and try to understand what the lead time is for getting a speaker to come to an event. But like I said, really a lot of resources available. On the third slide after this one, so 3 of 3, next slide. There's the detail and information that you would fill in order to request a speaker. If you click on that FCC speaker request link, an automated email will pop up, and it looks like the content that's written on the right-hand side of the screen. Basically says, I'm interested in having somebody share information at an upcoming event, and then you just fill out your personal information, and then somebody comes back and follows up with you. Okay, so Christine, I think this is where you and I can kind of tag team a little bit here and open up the session for some conversation with our participants here. So why don't I kick it off? First off, based on what you've heard today, based on what Carla, provided information on at the top of the call, based on what you understand regarding the importance of this benefit and the need in Fairfax County, are folks open to helping to get the word out to your constituencies about the EBB and helping us get some volunteers to help with the enrollment process? And you can either text your answer in the chat window, or please feel free to come off of mute and let us know your perspective.
I'll kick it off just because this reminds me a whole lot of when Obamacare first was instituted and people were coming in to the library a lot to get signed up for healthcare, and the healthcare.gov site initially was overwhelmed and people were getting frustrated. So these folks that are on our call are our experts. They know how to navigate almost any system. They navigate it when it changes in the middle, they navigate it on the fly. So, and they do this all the time with, the other thing that we were helping people with recently was the census. So the folks that you were talking to right now are fabulous at this, and they will do it every day because it's part of their everyday work and customer help with our population. So if anybody has an idea for like a bigger outreach, we can certainly discuss that. But I think that the kind of ease getting into this would be just everyday help of foot traffic. But right now our foot traffic is not super high because of we have limits in how many people can be in the occupancy limits right now, but that'll end soonish.
Right. Okay.
I'll just letting you know we have a question in the chat from Sarah.
Perfect. Yep, I see it. Thank you. So Sarah is asking, she would like to know more about what's been done already. Have you worked with the schools? Have you contacted faith communities? So those are great questions, and I'm going to hand it over to Carla for an initial response.
Yeah, so we're really trying to engage our county government partners, agencies, but as well as community partners. And so, yes, we have reached out to the schools, and we've reached out to our nonprofits and the faith community, and are looking forward to a couple of meetings next week where we'll be able to push out some more information. There'll be another session like this coming up, I think, next week. And we're hopeful that we'll have more folks on the line representing our community then. So yeah, a huge part of our outreach is connecting to our community partners, to include the schools, nonprofits, and faith community.
And Jessica told me that she had already emailed the Departments of Family Services, Neighborhood and Community Services, the Community Services Board, Housing, the Health Department, and Cable and Consumer. I'll get it on the third try. services. So like Carla said, a lot of our partner agencies are aware and are willing to send traffic and inquiries in our direction so we can help get them signed up.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to introduce Donna Walker-James from Computer Corps. Donna has been also, along with our friends at Fairfax County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and the District of Columbia, has been a great partner in working with us on figuring out how to close that digital divide and bring connectivity for all. So let me hand it over to Donna for a couple of comments.
Thank you, Mimi. And I have been here in the background listening in, so I appreciate everything everybody is doing. Computer Corps has been around for 22 years. We provide primarily digital literacy, and we provide free devices. So refurbished computers, mainly laptops, to our customers. We serve over 400 adult students with virtual learning now, fourfold what we were serving before COVID. We also will have physical sites starting up again in probably not till September, but we do have all sorts of things, workshops, et cetera. We teach basic foundational computer skills and some advanced skills. And then in terms of the current effort with EBB, we every Wednesday, starting tomorrow, we will have live workshops of stop by, get assistance on filling out the forms. Also, we've asked all of our students and our intern force to fill out the forms themselves to see how easy it is. We have some people who've already done it. And we will also be virtually helping people fill out the EBB form. So we're really excited to be part of this partnership. And Connected DMV is really helping us get the word out that we are available to assist.
Thank you so much, Donna. If you're staying for the second hour of our training, you're probably going to be a much better facilitator than I will be on these slides, but we'll figure it out. It'll be great. Okay, so also for the group, a couple of things to think about. What do you think would be the best way to promote the emergency broadband benefit to your constituencies? Do you think that emails and listservs are the best way to do that? Do you have suggestions of other things that we should try and we should look into, especially given what Christine was just mentioning about slightly lower traffic in the libraries and different in-person locations? What are people's thoughts?
My name is Jennifer, and I'm at the Chantilly Regional Library. And just one idea I thought of while listening to the presentation was connecting with our ELL groups. And a lot of those are currently virtual, and they have been very popular. So having that built-in audience and sharing that information with them was just one way to start it here.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Appreciate that. And thank you for Christine.
Oh yeah, thank you, Christine. Sorry.
English learner groups. That's terrific. Also, hopefully helpful that a lot of the FCC materials are in multiple languages. Okay. Any other ideas or recommendations from the group?
I was thinking that some of our branches that have a lot of public computers could have an event for signing up. We have 9 public computers in Herndon. That could be a possible event. Some branches have a lot more public computers available at once, though.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think that's a great idea, and it's probably a very appreciated service for folks who do not have access to a computer today. Probably makes it so much more convenient and helpful to have a reliable source and access to the internet to be able to complete the application process. Okay. Well, and last question for folks. If people are thinking ahead to helping families and maybe their existing customers enroll in the EBB, what kind of additional help or support do you think you would need? Donna has kindly offered up some additional information in the chat window about the sessions that are offered by Computer Core. Thank you so much for offering all of this, Donna. The timeframes for the different appointments, the ways to get involved, the interns who are going to be helping out. If you were to help somebody through the enrollment process, given your organization's resources, are there other things that might be needed and things that would be useful for going through that enrollment process?
Maybe I just thought of something that some of our branches could help with, which is some of our branches are piloting laptop lending, so people can borrow, it's actually a Chromebook. And that would probably enable them to do some of the application process, but maybe not all of it if it involves scanning and other things that Chromebooks just can't handle. But it might be a great idea, you guys, if you are, if your branch is piloting Chromebooks, to put information in those kits so that the people who are checking out Chromebooks, who likely don't have devices right now, would be our target audience. So we could include that information in those kits.
Yeah, Christine, it looks like you and Sarah are riding the same wavelengths. She just put some points in the chat room saying that, she was thinking about putting EBB flyers in the Chromebook cases. And she also mentioned that it's a bit outside of the library scope, but people could consider putting up signs at the bus shelters or the laundromats that might target the population that would be eligible and interested in this particular benefit. I think those are great ideas. That's exactly the type of creative thinking and then the execution, kind of arms and legs, where we're looking for help from people to both identify the idea and then provide the resources and the volunteers who can go ahead and get those signs out there and distribute that information. And then Donna just added some content. Computer Core provides free computers to our adult students to keep. We also have some free desktops, Linux and Chromebooks for the next 2 weeks due to downsizing their office. And she has provided her email address, donna@computercore.org. So I'll tell you what, devices are not easy to come by. If I were an organization that had the ability to store and share those devices with needed populations, I would jump on that. Donna, anything else you wanted to add to that?
Sorry, I keep shrinking the chat and then so I can see everybody. We are doing a computer drive on June 26th. It's actually we serve Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax County. We'd be happy to do a computer drive in Fairfax County. We're actually located in Fairfax County now, and we have several free sites around the county. We're doing a computer drive on South Washington Street in Alexandria on June 26th. So we'll be advertising broadly. We could use help advertising, but then we receive computers. We're a certified third-party refurbisher with Microsoft. We wipe them clean. We put Windows 10 and Office 2019 on the computer, and then we give them out to our clients. And depending who the partners are, usually we ask that students do enroll in our classes so that they receive the computer to use, but we have a whole variety of things. And like I was saying in the chat, we have a number of things that don't fit our current student population, like Linux computers. They can go online, but we don't teach Linux. So those are free to first come, first serve.
That is perfect. Thank you so much, Donna. In the interest of time, Christine, if you wouldn't mind if we display the slides again, I think we're going to wrap up the first part of this call and then give folks an opportunity if they would like to excuse themselves, and then we can move on to the next part of our training session here.
Hang on, I'm working on it. I'll be there in just a sec.
Take your time. It's not an issue at all. So while you're doing that, I'll just describe for the audience, our next steps are, we'll send an email to everybody with access to the information that we covered in this session, and you'll see all of those links that you saw to FCC resources, the EBB toolkit, information that you can personalize and customize for yourselves. We're also going to provide a link to an email. If you would click on that link and let us know how you would like to become involved in supporting outreach for the EBB. It's going to be similar to that link that you saw. Yeah, if you can go up one slide, maybe 2 slides, probably 2 slides. Yep, one more. There we go. Next steps. Whoops. Okay, yeah, let's start. No, yeah, perfect. Let's keep it here. As people are helping to raise awareness and maybe host some events or distribute some flyers, we're going to look for help from you all in just tracking activity more so that we can get a sense of progress that's being made and whether different events are helping to maximize participation in the EBB program. So just more to come on this one, but just letting you know that it would be great if you are able to help with outreach or sending, doing some information sessions, if you can kind of help track some numbers and measures on the side. On the next slide, please. For next steps, as I mentioned, we'll send out a note, ask you to reply back and let us know how you would like to get involved. That note will go to several folks from Fairfax County in today's call. It will also go to Elle James, who you met just now. Elle will contact and follow up, I think, in association with Jessica on next steps and how we can equip everybody with the right materials and information to keep spreading the word and getting good, encouraging messages to folks to participate in the EBB. And then on the next slide, you can see email addresses for all of our key points of contact and individuals who you can reach out to for more information. And then the next slide. So let's take a break here. Thank you to everybody who has participated up to this point, and we'll take maybe a 30-second break so people can exit if they would like to, and then we will continue forward with the next session, which is all about the step-by-step process for enrolling in the EBB. Thank you. And Christine, I don't know if you can change your view to a slideshow setting, because right now it's displaying the next slide, which is fine, but it's just making the initial slide smaller.
Sure, sorry about that.
No problem. All right, Christine, any luck on being able to project those slides? I don't know if you're speaking, Christine, but if you are on mute.
Okay, sorry, Mimi. I am not able to get back to that normal presentation mode. If you can walk me through it, I'm happy to do it. I just clearly am not as well versed in PowerPoint as I should be.
Sure. Do you want to go ahead and you can find the share the screen and locate the PowerPoint deck, right? Can you find that?
Yep.
Let's start with that. Oh, perfect. Okay. And then from there, just go to the bottom right of your screen where there's a teeny tiny little slideshow, like a big movie projector. Go a little bit to your right next to the little minus where the magnifier is, go all, yep, right there. Click on that. And just give it a second. Okay, huh.
And I would just say at those, at the bottom of where you see the
Yeah,
the PowerPoint screen, I can't remember which one of them it is, but one of those things where it looks like a computer screen.
yeah, it might be the right next to the right of the magnifying glass.
Yeah, right of the
That one.
glass. Yeah.
Try clicking on the, go down to the bottom. Yep, that one. No, that's not
Maybe
it.
the next one.
Mimi, I'm not sure what's causing that, but I'm also happy to share my screen if that would be easier.
Yeah, Elle, why don't you go ahead and do that? That would be great. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's no worries at all. This is the fun of technology these days.
Thank you, Elle.
Perfect. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Next. Next. All right, step-by-step process. Get ready, strap in for a super wild and exciting time. It is, I'm gonna set your expectations right now. It is not that exciting, but again, forewarned is forearmed, and it's usually, I find that it's usually helpful to see what these different screens look like ahead of time, just so that you know what you're getting into and you know how to advise your clients and residents on what to do and how to do it. So next slide. Okay, when people go, first off, before you go into the application, here are some resources that are going to be useful for folks. There's an overview video. You'll be able to click on the link in the materials that get sent out. It's a short video that describes the emergency broadband benefit in the words of the FCC and Usac. Helpful to take a look at it and just understand the context and some of the key messages that they are describing at a federal level. Next slide. Okay, so when somebody clicks on the getemergencybroadband.org page and they click on, I think it's the third step that says apply for EBB, this is part of the first screen that they'll see. Real basic information, enter in their name, enter in their date of birth. Next slide. And then here's the interesting part. This used to only say provide either your social security number or your tribal ID number. Usac has updated their website to say you now have 3 different ways of verifying your identification. You can either enter in the last 4 digits of your social security, you can enter in your official tribal identification number, or you can offer one of the other forms of government issued identification, which could be a driver's license, a military ID, a passport, a taxpayer identification number, or other government ID. They did not tell us what they mean by other government ID, but the first four are the ones that we have been advised are the ideal ones to submit if the person does not have a social or a tribal ID number. For those other government issued IDs, the individual will have to upload a scanned photo of that identification, which will then be validated by somebody on the national verifier side on the back end. And that's the part that ends up being more manual, and it takes a little more time. So you can see at the bottom of the slide, we note that using an alternate form of identification that needs to be uploaded will be checked manually. Again, the FCC told us it would be in a matter of minutes. We will see if that's really gonna continue to be the turnaround time given the higher volume of applicants that are coming in. Okay, next slide, please. So people will be asked to provide their home address. They will also be told that they cannot use a PO box. Part of the reason for that is that if they are, first off, to verify identity, and then secondly, this is the type of information that the service providers will also use in the event that they need to schedule an installation appointment, and they need to know where to go, and they need to know, what kind of equipment may already be in place. Now, the next part of the question is going to ask whether the applicant qualifies for EBB through themselves or through a child or a dependent. If they say that they qualified because a child or dependent is, eligible for one of those programs, the next screen that shows up on the right, they will be asked to provide the legal name of that child or dependent and that individual's date of birth. Next slide. And then just like they did for themselves, they also have to provide identity verification of that child or dependent using the exact same options that were provided earlier. Next. Okay, once that initial information is completed, the individual has to set up an account within Usac. This is the information that the Usac site asks for. You got to create a username, got to choose a password. Those are all the conditions that need to be met for that password. And this is where the navigator can do a great job of reminding somebody if they don't have many online accounts that they want to pick a password that's going to be hard for somebody to hack into, but something that's kind of easy for them to remember. They need to remember this password in order to continue the process and to keep being able to run through the application and ultimately get the EBB. And then, as I mentioned before, this person has to provide an email address. And then they can provide a phone number, but that is optional. They do not have to. And then there's the whole, verifying that they are not a robot. And then they submit the application on the next slide. Once all of that happens, the national verifier will come back and provide a welcome notice, and they'll let people know that they can go ahead and apply. Now, when they come back to the getemergencybroadband.org website, you can see that people can either apply for the Lifeline application or for the EBB application. Something to note is that an individual can technically apply for both Lifeline and EBB, and they can use the credit from both programs towards broadband service and internet service. It's a pro and con. We are focused on the EBB. I do not have all of the detail and information about the Lifeline program. There are other resources, I think, available on the FCC and the Usac website that can tell you more about the Lifeline program. The main thing that we've been told is there are pros and cons to them. While the EBB is a temporary benefit, it is a higher amount of a discount of up to $50 a month. The Lifeline benefit is an ongoing program, but the benefit is smaller. It's $9.25 discount per month. So something to consider, and something to think about when you're working with your residents and consumers. Next slide. Okay, so this is where somebody is going to identify which program or programs they currently participate in that qualify them to receive the emergency broadband benefit. And you can see there's a whole range of them that are available, from the SNAP program to Medicaid, Social Security, federal public housing assistance, veteran pension and survivor benefit, federal Pell Grant, free and reduced price lunch programs, having a substantial loss of income, being part of a tribal specific program. So any one of those are eligible programs for the EBB. The ones that are at a national level, which I believe are SNAP, Medicaid, Social Security, federal public housing, veterans benefit, those are the ones that I believe are that are automatically able to be validated in the national verifier. Non-federal programs require uploading of additional documentation. So the Pell Grant, unfortunately, even though it's a federal program, what I understand is that the FCC and Usac have not figured out how to quickly upload Pell Grant recipient data into the National Verifier database. So there's no automated feed of data that's going back and forth. So there needs to be additional documentation that is provided. Additionally, as you may know, public housing assistance is available at the federal level and at a local or state level. It is only the federal level of public housing assistance that can be automatically verified through the national verifier, not at a state or local level. So that the general rule is federal programs can be validated in a more automated way through the national verifier. State and local programs will require uploading documentation. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide. People will be asked to review their information. Please make sure that if you're advising somebody, that they go through and double check all of their information. As we all know, these things are complicated enough to fill out. They are even harder to unwind and undo an error that may have been put in there by mistake. So you really want to help people make sure they've put in accurate information, because if the information is incorrect, it could create an unintentional rejection. And if it is a mistake, then you have to get into queue with customer service and get it fixed and then reapply. And it's just, more additional bureaucratic steps that need to be completed. So as much as possible, we would love for people to be able to update and provide accurate information from the beginning. And then at the bottom of the screen, you can see that the consumer needs to check that little box at the bottom that verifies that they are consenting to the information being provided, that it's allowed to be collected, used, and shared for purposes of this application process, and that they are offering up that content and information to the FCC and USAC. All right, next page. Okay. The next thing I think I mentioned before is that the FCC and USAC want to make sure that they are validating everybody's residence and address. So they are asking people to confirm the address that was provided. And then they're also asking on the right-hand side, I have not seen this before, I don't know if other people have, but they're asking for consumers to do a pin drop kind of like you do on Google Earth and other, map related GIS tools, put a pin drop on where your residence is located so that they can verify accuracy of the residence and information. Again, this is something that might not be a big deal to many of us who use computers and the internet on a daily basis, but it may be something that's a bit confusing and takes a little time to get used to if you're doing it for the first time. So this is a good example of a place where additional navigation is helpful. All right, next step, confirm your household. Yeah, so Rebecca, thank you. Yeah, like I said, this is the first time that I've seen a federal application form that includes this type of pin drop GIS level of detail. So that's why we wanted to let you all know that this is the type of data and the level of detail that people are getting into. So on the next screen about confirming your household, this is additional information that folks are asking for. Remember, I was telling you about the difference between one household versus multiple households. So these are the kinds of questions that applicants will be asked to fill out as it relates to their household and the type of household that they live in, whether they are in an apartment building, a single family house, a nursing home or assisted living facility, or other type of dwelling. And then if they are in a single family house where 3 or more households have applied for the benefit, FCC is asking for additional information as it relates to the number of people residing at that address and the number of people in the applicant's household. But all of that is optional information. The other thing that I want to point out to you, you may notice in the fine print on the very bottom, there's this message that says you have until May 22nd to continue this section, blah, blah, blah. That is just an example. That is an illustration. I don't want you to fixate on that date. That was only because the people who took these screenshots created a fake account, and then that fake account only had X number of days in order to complete this whole process. I think that account was created back in March, which is why it said, they had until May or some time like that. There is nothing about May 22nd that is a magical date that is not associated with any kind of deadline for applying for the EBB, okay? Next slide. Okay, this is where the applicant really needs to understand and read through, some fine print and some agreements and consent in terms of they have to consent that they live, oh my God, this is tiny, that there is, that they live in an address with more than one household, if that is the case. For each of the different statements that are listed in here, they have to be able to initial and validate that they can attest to this information being accurate. So back when I told you that there are some things that the applicant is going to have to fill out for themselves, this would be an example of that. But as long as a navigator is just walking them through and explaining, okay, this is what you are agreeing to when you put your initials here by number 1, number 2, and number 3, I think that helps to reduce the level of anxiety and concern. Okay, next slide. Okay, is there a question? Okay, I'm going to keep going. This was just an example of a message that might appear or a screen that might appear if for some reason the FCC did a check against the information that an applicant provided and said that they weren't able to validate that person's identity. If it is the case that somebody applies for the EBB and they weren't able to verify their identity because they didn't provide a social security number or a tribal recognized identification, that was, where we said they were going to have to upload an alternate form of identification and be able to provide that information. So, this is where the Usac and FCC would explain the type of information and the type of documentation that would need to be uploaded in order to proceed with the application. So it's just like when you are getting your real ID, like I mentioned before, or when you are applying to get a passport, right? So there's some acceptable forms of identification. They say right in here, show us one item out of this list of available options, or show us 2 items of the list of options here. Okay, next slide. Okay. And then, again, there's an additional slide that might come up if the USAC was not able to immediately confirm that the applicant qualifies for the EBB. And again, that just means that they have to provide additional information. So when they selected the program that they or a member of their household participates in order to qualify for the EBB, remember how I said sometimes you have to provide additional documentation? So first they would select whatever program that they currently participate in, and then the next step would likely be the need to document and upload a letter or an identifier or a confirmation form that states that this individual or this household member does in fact receive one or more of these different programs. Next. And then this last, I think this is one of the last slides where it's all that fine print, right? Making sure that people understand that when they put their initials next to each of those different items in this agreement, that they know what that means and they know what they are signing up for. I believe every one of these items that we listed, that is listed in here, is something that we covered in the earlier slide material. Like we said, they are agreeing that they are going to sign up for the EBB. They understand that it is a temporary subsidy. They understand that, my dependent currently receives assistance from a government program, and that's why we are eligible to participate and receive the EBB. I agree that if I move, I'm going to tell my service provider my new address within 30 days. Typically that doesn't happen, but if that does happen, then these are all just the terms and conditions that the applicant needs to initial and comply with if they want to receive the EBB. And as you can see on the far right side, we want to note only the person applying for the benefit can initial and sign these documents. You can help them, you can explain what each of these different statements are, and you can help them, type in and tell them what to enter in to do an electronic signature, but you cannot do it for them. Okay, next. And then, like I said before, this is an example of the screen that the applicant will see once they initial and sign and officially submit their application. They will receive this notice, and the National Verifier is going to take some time to determine qualification. Once the eligibility has been determined, that individual has up to 90 days to find an internet service provider and sign on to that provider's EBB participating program. Next. Okay. So one of the other things that's going to be important is the National Verifier will alert the applicant when they do qualify for the EBB. And you can see inside the note, right? It says your application has been approved. If you haven't already done so, the next step is to sign up with a participating internet company by 90 days from the day that this application has been approved. And you can see below, it also says if you don't sign up by that point, you will have to reapply for the EBB. And as we all know, because this is a temporary fund and benefit, reapplying puts you at the back of the line and significantly decreases the probability of being able to take advantage of this program and the benefit. When that person is going to contact a service provider and enroll in their EBB program, the service provider is going to ask for all that information that's in that box on the right-hand side, the individual's legal name as it was entered in the EBB application, the address that they provided, and their application ID number. So once they get that information, you would want to advise your client or that resident to save that information and know where it is so they can pull it up quickly when they are signing up with a service provider. And then you can see at the bottom, after they sign up with an internet company, they will receive their benefit. And then there's some phone numbers and emails that they can call and contact if they have questions or need assistance. Okay, next slide. I am not going to go through the application by mail. I'll be very honest with you. I have not done all of the research on the mail process side of it because we're really trying to encourage more people to go through the online process. Question from the chat window from Sarah. Is this qualification message emailed to them? Yes, it is emailed to them, and that is exactly why they had to set up an email account at the very beginning of the application process. It is also definitely emailed to them when the National Verifier needs additional time to review the uploaded documentation that validates that that individual, one, is who they say they are, if they're not providing an SSN or a tribal identification number, and two, if they are participating in a subsidized or benefit program that cannot be automatically verified through the National Verifier. Question from SGARC4, what languages is the website and application available in? My understanding is that as of right now, the website and application is available only in English and in Spanish. I would encourage that if you have constituencies who need this application in other languages, that you contact Usac or the FCC and tell them that you have, a population of individuals who need this application in another language. If they have it immediately available, I think that they would make it readily available to folks. If they don't have it readily available, then that is where they need the feedback and the input from individuals like yourselves to understand the justification for the effort that it would take to create a translated version of the website and application in a different language. Any other questions, comments? Okay, next slide. Again, applying by mail, I really would not recommend that. We did provide the information because it was made available in one of the Usac webinars, but I do not think that that is the optimal way to participate in this program. So next slide, do's and don'ts. So we, again, are saying that advocates, we're calling them digital navigators, but advocates and supporters, you can hold consumers' hands through the process. You can help them understand options that are available to them. You can help them understand the type of documentation and proof of eligibility or proof of participation that they need to provide in order to successfully complete the application. At the end of the day, the consumer themselves must be the individual that is going to initial the certification, sign the application. They have to consent to enroll in the EBB program. They have to consent that they are going to sign up for the specific program through the service provider. Service providers can't do it on their behalf. Service providers have all been told that they must receive confirmation and affirmative consent from the consumer. They're going to sign up for EBB and they're going to sign up for that service provider's one or whichever program within their list of offerings that is part of the EBB. And then last item, advocates and supporters cannot apply on behalf of the consumers. Next slide. Okay, even more places where you can get help. So I have not tried calling the Usac hotline here, the Emergency Broadband Support Center. I have not tried emailing them. I mentioned before I did submit a request to ask for an expert to join us. I actually wanted to ask them to join us for this call this afternoon, but I have not received a response back. So I don't have a sense for how backlogged they are, other than to say that, as I mentioned, on the homepage of the emergency broadband page, they've already listed out a notification message that they are experiencing very high volumes of applications, emails, and calls. So just, again, that's another area where navigators can help their applicants to understand that people might not be able to respond to them immediately, might take a little bit of time. Next slide. And then I think we covered this in the beginning, but just to repeat, the consumer FAQ, it is getting updated on a regular basis. So again, as people are going through the application process, I think more questions are going to get submitted. And I always find that it's a good practice to go to the FAQ documents first to see if my particular question has already been asked and answered. So then I don't have to submit it myself. The participating providers lookup tool, as I mentioned before, it filters and sorts the list of providers participating in the broadband benefit by state. And Carla and her team have been fantastic about taking that long list for the Commonwealth of Virginia and then filtering it down into a more manageable list of service providers who are known to provide service within Fairfax County. There is some consumer information, and then lastly, that same getemergencybroadband.org, that is the website where people need to go to start their application to apply for the benefit. Next. Okay. There are a couple of additional resources that people can use. They can go out onto the fcc.gov/broadband benefit site to get the latest information. And they can also go to getemergencybroadband.org for additional resources, information, pamphlets. That video is out there as well. So I really do think that the FCC and USAC are trying their hardest to educate and provide good information about the program before people go and apply. Honestly, it's just that, as with anything else, many people just don't want to have to wade through all of that information. They just want to rush out there and apply immediately, as quickly as possible. And we really just want to help people make it as positive an experience as we can. Next. Oh, we made it. All right. Elle, if you don't mind, if you can stop sharing your screen. Thank you. All right, that was a lot of content. Really appreciate everybody hanging in there to walk through the screens. Appreciate your questions, your comments, your feedback. We still have time. If people have additional comments or recommendations, would love to hear them. But as I mentioned before, the next step that we're going to have is we will send through Carla and her team and Christine and Jessica and others. We'll send a thank you note to folks to, first off, acknowledge the time and effort that you've put into this. And we will have a link in there that will give you the opportunity to let us know how you would like to get involved and how you would like to help out with this whole emergency broadband benefit. Let me hand it over to Christine or Carla for any closing and summary thoughts.
Are there any library specific questions that I can answer while we're all kind of on the line and we have Carla and Mimi's expertise?
Yeah, I have a question. I just wondered if you were holding an event, what kind of language support in terms of translation do you think might be necessary or helpful?
That's a great question. I mean, I think you would be the subject matter expert on that just based on your branch, unless Mimi or Carla has other information there.
I mean, I've seen studies of I think there was a report that I read recently, might have been in 2020 or early 2021, that listed out the foreign language requests by geography, and it did break it down to the county level, but my data doesn't go beyond the county level, so it doesn't break down into the sub neighborhoods. Carla, I don't know if you've got other data that you can share.
Yeah, I would say, for any event, and again, we're being mindful of still being in a pandemic response, even though things are starting to loosen up a bit. We would be heavily relying on our language access coordinator, Grelia Steele, who can give us some additional information about primary languages spoken in different areas. But we would also be partnering really closely with our community partners who have language capability. And so if we do sort of go down the path of conducting events, the planning process would include how to make sure that we have sufficient staff and volunteers to manage our language needs. You know, what we have utilized throughout the pandemic, which isn't ideal, but when we are not able to provide support through staff and volunteers, we always have the language line resource available and would be able to utilize language line in this case, but that would not be ideal. We would, most likely be relying on our volunteers and staff. And in terms of data, like I said, our language access coordinator has data that is a bit more discrete about where languages are spoken in the county so that we can be prepared. And really a lot of folks, people that know their programs or know their facilities know the traffic in and out. And so we would really be relying on what to be the population that utilizes your facility. So
and
that's a good question.
It is a great question. And one of the other things that I feel obligated to point out is that Brian Hill just sent an email that while we were on this call saying that we are expected to continue to stay masked because we work in Virginia. And so I think that complicates the transaction enormously, like exponentially. And then if you have a language barrier thrown in, that almost makes an event impossible. It would, to me, one-on-one would be hard enough. So I'm not trying to discourage anybody. I just think that's a tough expectation to fill right now, unfortunately, when people need it most.
I'm just thinking that those forms could be very intimidating for people and that you would want to make sure that you were conveying information in a very accurate manner.
Agreed.
I think, if, having events singularly focused on doing this is probably not in our plans in the immediate future, but we do plan to conduct outreach where people are already going to be gathering. So at food distribution sites and other places where people are going who have needs. And so again, making sure that there is support there that can handle not just sort of the technicalities of the process, but also the language access challenges is going to be really important.
Yeah, in the chat window, Sarah Souther provided a note that Fairfax County Public School has language data. So that might be another source of information that could be worth investigating. And Barbara provided a comment, I think, in agreement with what, excuse me, with what Rebecca, Carla, and others have mentioned, that keeping socially distanced is going to be a priority for many of us. God knows I just got through my second vaccination on Saturday, which is great, but I'm still dealing with the effects of it, including suddenly a frog in my throat. So apologies for that. Other questions, comments, or feedback on today's session and on getting enrollment support for the EBB?
Well, I can just say, Mimi, that I love the idea of us including all this information in the Chromebook kits, and then also your idea about having maybe in some of our targeted branches that are in some of the high, the areas that have less connectivity, reliable connectivity, putting like Ask Me About the emergency broadband benefit signage up. I don't know that it's necessary at all branches, but if we have targeted branches that we can, you know, start to get that question so that people are at least curious about what it is, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I will tell you that, so far I've had 3 orientation sessions with Montgomery County, 1 session with DC's Office of the Chief Technology Officer. We've got another one this afternoon at 5 p.m. and then our first session here. And each jurisdiction is handling it a little bit differently because it's tailored to your geography, your population, your constituencies. So I think that the approach that you guys are taking is exactly spot on, right? It is about really understanding and respecting the unique characteristics of Fairfax County, your neighborhoods within them, the ways that you think are going to be the most effective way to reach them. And what works in one neighborhood of Fairfax County might be different from what would work well in a secondary area. So this is why it's so encouraging to me to see that we've got representatives from all kinds of locations and that we're sharing good content to all of you so that you can take it and personalize it in a way that's going to make good sense for the people who you know to be in your communities. Barbara did have a question of when will the recording be available to rewatch? I am going to defer to Fairfax County on that, as it is your Zoom session that we are using.
Bobby usually does things in 10 or 15 minutes, so look for it by, 4:30. No, I'm just kidding. We'll put it up as soon as we can, and we'll send out an email. But Bobby's lickety split about this stuff.
4 minutes or it's free, right? All right, we're getting to the top of our hour. Very much appreciate everybody hanging in there. You guys have been really terrific and really helpful and constructive with your comments, your questions, your recommendations. So very much appreciate that. We will give you, I think, 2 minutes back of your time. So generous of us, but we're always available for any questions. You've got Elle's contact information. Elle can very quickly find, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and write my email address here in the chat window. And you are, Carla and Christine know how to find me as well. I'm not hiding anywhere. I'm not going underground. I'm not like the cicadas. So feel free to reach out with any questions, comments, feedback. And again, thank you all so much for all of your support and participation. And everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you.